Welcome to Ray Reads, a podcast where I discuss the books I am currently reading. For this episode of Ray Reads, I will be discussing Inheritance, the fourth book of the Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini. To begin, it is incredibly convenient how the army is able to claim the Dothiart, the enchanted deadly spear. Its appearance all of a sudden feels random. These magic weapons are so rare, and yet, here it is, falling right into the Varden's hands. I would have expected a greater struggle to acquire something like this. Anyway, let's talk about my girl, Nazuwata. It is interesting how she meets Galbatorix before Aragon and Saphira do. And it is all because of Murtagh. He showed his brother mercy, but then he convinces the king of Nazuwata's value. Thorn and Murtagh himself are the ones responsible for Nazuwata's abduction. While this is rather messed up, I confess that her imprisonment is, in my opinion, the best part of this book. As we learned from the Trial of the Long Knives, Nazuwata has incredible willpower. Under Galbatorix's torture, she once again demonstrates her strength. Now, Galbatorix can easily break her with his power, but he enjoys the sport of torturing and forcing an agreement out of his prey. I wish that we had more chapters from Nazuwata's point of view outside of her imprisonment. For instance, the meeting about sneaking under Drosleona should have been from Nazuwata's perspective. I also would have liked to see more of her leading the Varden. She has accomplished an amazing feat by uniting all of the races against Galbatorix. I love that she is crowned queen in the end, yet part of me believes that Nazuwata ought to have been chosen as the next dragon rider instead. So, this brings me to Arya. She has way too much power now. She really should not be both the Queen of the Elves and the next dragon rider. And if she should just be one, then I believe that Arya should only be a queen. I say this because of her reaction to how Aragon handles the situation with Sloane the Butcher. In his place, Arya would doubtlessly have murdered Sloane. The problem with that is she would have acted on her own authority without consulting any leaders. Both Nazuwata and King Oren commend Aragon for not playing judge, jury, and executioner. Arya is too independent to not be a leader, a queen. Although, I do find it odd that the elves actually wanted Arya as their queen, when Arya herself states that she is considered to be unusual among her kind after spending so much time around humans and dwarves. Speaking of elves, it is a shame that we never truly get to know the 12 spellcasters assigned to protect Aragon and Saphira. I cannot even name half of them off of the top of my head. It would have been nice if the 12 elves were treated more like people than tools. One of these elves, Worden, dies in Drosleona. It is unfortunate indeed, but it is unfair of Aragon to place the blame for it on Elva's shoulders. Sure, Elva could have detected the trap and saved Worden had she accompanied them on this mission. But she truly has no obligation to place herself in dangerous situations just because her powers are useful. Aragon and everyone else who wants to take advantage of Elva need to learn to respect her autonomy. Elva has every right to refuse. It would be good of her to help, of course, but she is not obligated to. This is the hill I will die on. Before we move on, let's talk some more about Helgrind and Drosleona. The first thing I have to say is, it bothers me how the High Priest of Helgrind is referred to as it rather than they. If the book was trying to make the point that the High Priest is more creature than human, I could understand. Yet, my problem is that it seems more like the it pronoun comes from the confusion regarding the High Priestess sex. Gender-neutral they-them pronouns have been around in literature since Chaucer, and they certainly could have been utilized here. The important thing that I have to say next is, I am proud of Aragon for freeing the slaves in Drosleona at last. This has been one of his goals ever since the very first book. I think this scene deserves more attention than it gets. At the first slave auction, Aragon determined that his primary motivation as a writer is eradicating cruelty and injustice. He is living up to his promise. In this book, Aragon is forced to step up and lead the Varden in Nazuada's stead. Well, he's supposed to anyway. He actually spends most of his time as leader away from the army. Aragon does give one speech to the Varden, though. We readers are not privy to that particular dialogue. We get the impression that, despite his nerves, Aragon delivers a good speech. It's not brilliant, but it is good enough. It would have been nice if the speech was printed out so that readers could judge it for ourselves. Aragon is obviously far from perfect as a person. He has several relatable flaws, and these are part of what defines him. Aragon's true name is an honest reflection of himself. I love the concept of a character being confronted with their true self and all the hard truths that comes with. I love the whole scene where Aragon labors to discover his true name. In some ways, it reminds me of the Court of Thorns and Roses series and the Ouroboros. As a side note, the throne room door in Inheritance is the first time that I have seen, or rather read of, an Ouroboros formed with a dragon instead of a snake. It is a strong symbol to place on the throne room door. The Ouroboros symbolizes a never-ending cycle. The last major point I want to touch on is the discovery of the preserved dragon eggs. Truthfully, I was so relieved by this. I really thought that the dragons were going to soon become extinct. Aragon and Saphira dedicate much thought to how to raise the hatchlings. Their only solution is to embrace their foretold exile. The mysterious women from the previous book make a brief reappearance in the final battle. The two of them help and save Roran's life, only to vanish again. Paolini is teasing us with glimpses of these women, and I am dying to know more about them. I was excited by their reappearance, and then I was disappointed that they were gone again so soon. There should be a spin-off series about them. I still think Brazinger is the best book in this series, but Inheritance is good too.